All right, good evening and welcome to Iyun with Benzion, Yevamos, Daf, Daf Mem. Yeah, we're doing Daf Mem tonight. Number 40. It is Pesach, and appropriately, the organizers of Yom Meir Shapiro knew that in the year 2022, we'd be learning Yevamos Daf Mem on the first night of Pesach, the first day of Pesach, where you have the mitzvah of Achilas Matzah. It was actually last night. And I wonder Daf Yomi to start at night or to start in the morning. I don't know. Let's assume it starts last night. The Gemara here on Daf Mem talks about a brisa we have. We have a brisa which talks, first part of the brisa talks about Karban Mincha, eating Karban Mincha. Second part of the brisa talks about the mitzvah of Yibum. It compares the two. So whatever way of explaining the Reisha, which talks about eating the mitzvah of eating a Karban Mincha, the Kohen has to eat the Karban Mincha after they burn the komates on the Mizbeach. A Kohen is supposed to eat the Karban Mincha. You don't eat the flour raw. You obviously bake it and you make it. And Torah says you eat it matzah. You can't eat it chametz. You have to eat it matzah. And then the Brisa talks about Yibum. And the Gemara says there's a mitzvah of Yibum, lim mitzvah. So there's two explanations of this Brisa about Yibum. How do you explain it? So one explanation on the bottom of Lamed 10 on the page, says the Brisa is doing Abba Shol, and the Torah is telling you mitzvah. When there's a mitzvah to do yibum, it has to be lim mitzvah. That's what a lim mitzvah. It has to be with the right intentions. If you have the right intentions to do l'shem mitzvah, not l'shem noi, l'shem isha, it's not for she's beautiful. You have the right doing it l'shem mitzvah, then you're mekayim mitzvah of yibum. If you're not doing the right intentions, you're not mekayim mitzvah of yibum. Mekaro lios erva. It sounds like it's an avera, maybe even a mamzerus. Then there's eishes ach, because there's only no mitzvah of yibum to push away or to allow the isra of eishes ach not to apply over here. That's the way Abba Shol explains it, and Ravdimi explains the Brisa according to Abba Shol. Rava explains the Brisa according to the Rabbanan. He learns that it's talking about Yibam. All the Gemara is saying Yibam mitzvah, that the mitzvah of Yibam precedes, is preferable over the mitzvah of Chalitza. So that will lead to a different explanation by this mitzvah of eating the Karban Mincha. According to Rava, the Gemara says it makes sense. The Gemara is saying that at the end of the Brisa, the Karban Mincha is that the final head of the Karban Mincha. It's a mitzvah to eat the Karban Mincha, the Kohen who is makriv of the Karban himself, who makriv of the Kohen himself. If you're not the Kohen's makriv of the Kohen, it's also a mitzvah. It's preferable that the Kohen who does the avoda eats it, but it could also be eaten by another Kohen. That's just not the best way of doing it, which would be parallel to Yibum. It's preferable to do Yibum over Chalitza. Chalitza would be okay also. It's a viable option. It's preferable to Yibum over Chalitza. According to Abba Shol, it's a difference. Trey Gavni, the Gemara says, if you do it the right way, then it's a mitzvah. If you do it the wrong way, it's Aster Mikar Lios Ma'amzer. The Gemara struggles to figure out exactly how you read this Brisa by Karban Mincha according to Abba Shol, according to the Rizk Ravdimi. The Gemara then says at the bottom here, the Gemara says, the Gemara concludes, what would Abba Shol say? Or what would Rabbi Ravdimi say? Ela ratza matzah ochla, ratza cholet ochla. That's the maskana of the Gemara. You could eat it either matzah or cholet. Cholet means you scald it. You scald the matzah. And then you eat it afterwards. What does it mean, scalding? So Rashi says scalding is in hot water. Now, the Gemara then continues, Hai cholet hechidami. What is the nature of this bread that is scalded? Is matzah that's scalded? Eat matzah. If it's really matzah, it's matzah. So why is it preferable, or why is it? It sounds like according to Abba Shol, it's usher to eat it challah, right? If you eat it matzah, you're mekayim the mitzvah. If you don't eat it, if you eat it challah, then you're not mekayim the mitzvah. So if it's really matzah, it's matzah. If it's challah, then how could the Torah call it matzah? Olam emalach matzahi. Really, it is matzah. Lahaki tana beikra la'akiv. Torah tells you la'akiv. Now it's problematic. Rashi. And Tozu Shonim deals with Rashi. According to Rashi's explanation over here, the way he learns the pasuk from the Meluim. Normally, la'akiv means that the Torah says something twice, or repeats itself. To go out of its way to repeat itself, tell you that it has to be done this way. If you don't do it in that way, you're not yotze, which would make sense over here. B'shol by yibum, if you do it l'shem mitzvah, yotze mitzvah yibum. If you don't do l'shem mitzvah, you're shem nor you're not yotze the mitzvah. That's what the simple explanation would be. So Tozu Shonim is bothered by what Rashi's explanation over here. And he has a different explanation over here. And he actually does learn la'akiv, which would really fit with Yibum, is that if you do it chal, you're not yotzi the mitzvah. right? You're not Yotze the mitzvah, right? So what's even the Havamina? So why? So what's the Havamina? So the Gemara explains. What does it mean? There seems like you have an option either to do either matzah or either challah. If you do either challah, you're not yotze. But it has to be that there was a way of calling challah matzah. Otherwise, it's not. The Brisa has no place to tell me you have to do it matzah, not challah. It must be challah somewhere else. It's called matzah. So the Gemara said, yeah, we do find by Pesach. The Gemara says. Adam Yosef ba Yidei Chazal, but Avi the Chaldi Mikara came with the other Afya Kitaner Lechem Ani Kari Babe. Adam Yosef ba Yidei Chazal. Pesach. It says by Pesach, it says Lechem Oni. An extra pasuk is Lechem Oni, poor man's bread. To tell you, even though normally it's not matzah, by Kar Mincha it's not matzah. By the first night of Pesach, it is matzah. Now, what is the subject of Chaltes? I like to suggest that Chalti means scalding, right? It means to scald it. I would say it's scalding. There's two ways of making matzah, right? Matzah just means that chametz means the bread. There's leaven; it rises, right? Use yeast or an agent to help the dough rise. So you use an agent to help the dough rise. So what you're doing basically is you're making it the chametz. Now we know that if the dough doesn't rise, it's not considered chametz. So what does matzah mean over here? So I like to suggest over here that really technically, as long as it doesn't bake for 18 minutes, as the Gemara says a mill, the Gemara says a mill, it doesn't have to look like the matzah that we presently eat. The matzah that we presently eat is very thin. It's almost like a cracker. It doesn't look exactly. It looks more like a cracker than it looks like bread. Technically, on Sfardim, I think they eat matzahs that are more like lafas or more like pitas. Where it doesn't rise. It's not risen like challah, like normally challah, like you rise. We eat on Shabbos, the challahs, but it is considered matzah. And technically, I think the Gemara is saying that's the preferable. That's real matzah. That in order to be yosei the korban mincha, you can't eat chametz, you can't eat challahs, but you have to bake it into something like pitas or lafas. Chalti means you're scalding, not the water is scalding. You scald, the fire is scalding. You take the dough and you put it in such high heat that the matzah is baked in, like nowadays the matzah is not even close to 18 minutes. I mean, it's baked in like 2 minutes. I mean, you put it in so thin and you butter it. Because the dough is so thin, you burn it. That's why all the matzahs that you get from Schatzer and all these companies, these groups that make the matzah, it's burnt, it's crisp, it's like a cracker. That's the Gemara saying that by korban mincha, you don't even yotzi with it. You have to have a pita. All the Torah is saying, that's the Gemara says. It's not called matzah. What we're eating, most people are eating now, is not called matzah. But it is called lechem oni. It is called lechem oni. The Torah says matzah is teichel, but lechem oni also says lechem oni, poor man's bread, because poor men don't always have bread. They don't have pita. Sometimes they have crackers. So that's Torah includes that to say that first night of Pesach it's called matzah, and the fact that b'di'evid you're yotze because it's still called poor man's bread. Only over there it'd be called matzah because it also says lechem oni, crackers included. When it comes to korban mincha, you have to have the pitas or the lavas. Crazy stuff, but it could be the Sfardim are right. Look, you should be having pitas as long as it wasn't baked for 18 minutes. Not what we commonly refer to as matzah. I hope you enjoyed today's share, shed some light what really should be going on during Pesach. See you. Mishnayos.